My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
This half hour brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Auto, home, life, business, boat, motorcycle, RV. I'm just listing some of the insurance needs. Everybody has multiple insurance needs. And you want to get the best price. If it's possible to save money, boy, you'd love to see that happen, especially in today's world. Purdy Insurance works hard to make sure all of that happens. That you're fully insured, primary, and to also make sure that you save money. Customer service means everything to them at Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. All right. So, do we have Neal yet?
We do.
Sir, welcome, and we appreciate any team that is 2-0 with 1 touchdown and 8 field goals. We welcome you.
You know, it's great to be here, and that's just not a stat that you see very often, but it seems like this might be the thing for this season. You know, two weeks in, teams aren't throwing successfully all that much, and scoring's dropping, and we're waiting to see what the league's response is going to be.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see what the league's response happens to be. Before I get to the Steelers, we had an entire off season where offensive coordinators have been dissecting defenses from the previous year. And we all know what the influence Cover 2 has had on taking away big plays and creating 8, 10, 12-play drives. Are you surprised that offenses and coordinators have not adapted better? Because we're seeing it's actually getting worse, not better.
You know what the root of that answer is? It's always been kind of a chicken versus the egg thing. Is it the coordinator? Is it the players? Yeah. To some degree, I think everybody would agree that it's both. But I think what we're seeing, just based around looks around the league, and a lot of this is kind of rooted too in anecdotal evidence. There's a lot of hyperbole involved with it. I think quarterback play itself at the bottom level is way lower than it usually is. And the top is not holding out the way that it has in the past to kind of bolster the numbers a bit. We haven't had a quarterback with a tremendous game yet, but we've had a lot of really bad ones. Mm-hmm. 8 quarters of watching Bo Nix. I can't imagine anybody outside of maybe Bo Nix's family thinks that he should be in the position that he's in. Bryce Young, it was almost merciful that they announced that they're not going to play him next week. There are a lot of teams that are struggling to figure everything out. And in my opinion, is quarterbacks haven't been able to bail out coordinators who otherwise haven't done all that good of a job. And I think if we look at this compared to what I think history is going to call kind of the golden age of quarterbacks, your your Brady versus Manning with Breeze, Rodgers, Roethlisberger kind of in the background. The main players aren't producing as well as the predecessors. The real top quarterbacks in the past have done, and because of that, you're really starting to see a lower end that's being exposed for struggling quite a bit. And that brings us back to exactly how you started this segment. Justin Fields is commanding legitimately one of the most mediocre offenses, production-wise, that we've seen in the NFL. And they've had both of the games they've played in fairly well under control offensively. And they haven't played well. They've only scored one touchdown. The MVP of the league might be a kicker right now. I mean, that's just the way it is. You had two kickers in week one that hit 6 field goals, and then one in week 2 that hit 7. This is not offensive football the way that we're used to seeing it. I really think the biggest thing is the play of the mid-level to lower-level quarterbacks is way below what it has been in the past.
There's nothing you can do about that. I mean, because you can only go by what talent is produced for you to take. But we've seen a couple things. I know eventually I'm going to get to the Steelers, I promise. But Jordan Love waited. Aaron Rodgers waited. Drake May is waiting. I know there's impatience by ownership, coaches, and especially by fans about, well, you drafted this guy, you better play him. But is there something to be said? I mean, it's an individual basis, I get it, but is there something to be said for waiting?
I've always thought you're drafting a player and not drafting a position. And what I mean by that is just because he was the first overall pick, third overall pick, whatever, does not mean he has to play. You're drafting a player, hopefully, because everyone will say this. It doesn't pertain to quarterbacks, just offensive linemen. You draft this guy, you've got that position set for the next 15 years, which is insanely not valid statistically. Mm-hmm. Injuries obviously play a huge factor in the longevity of the career of a player, but everybody thinks you get these quote-unquote non-essential positions and you draft a player, a highly regarded first-round player, put him into that spot, he's going to be there forever. The quarterback, though, is not only going to be there forever, but the entire length of his career is not looked at all for the quarterback. It's immediately. Yet that's the position that's the hardest to learn, the hardest to pick up immediately, and requires the most work by an entire coaching staff to get ready to play each week. So Caleb Williams, it's kind of funny. He's not getting nearly the amount of criticism that other first overall picks who have struggled in 2 games is getting. He's not playing particularly well. They're asking him to do a lot of stuff that he hasn't done to this point, and he's not living up to that. I'm not criticizing him in a way that requires punishment. It's just he's not playing well. Their team overall is not playing well, but he is not playing well. Nobody is going to say, though, and nobody has said, sit Caleb Williams. He's got to play right away. We've got to learn these things as we go. We've got to figure all this out. Well, then what about the guys that do wait? Why is that different? Jordan Love waited because he was, the 27th overall pick?
Yep.
I have a theory that they didn't even want to draft Love. Love wasn't even their guy, but San Francisco traded up and took Brandon Ayuk one spot before the Packers were picking, and Love was next on their board. That's why they didn't even talk to Rodgers about it. I don't think they were prepared for that. They obviously had a high-level quarterback who took that as it turns out, a deeply personal insult, and won 2 more MVPs before he left. So you can understand where Green Bay's thinking is as far as not playing him, but that's not Love's fault. At the same time, we saw Love play during the Rodgers era, and he didn't play nearly as well as he's playing right now. So the main thing I would say is how good and how consistent is your coaching staff going to be? if you have a structure in place where you can still compete and you don't need this guy to learn as he goes, per se, I think you should sit him just for the sake of letting him develop. Because the reason I say that is look at Bryce Young. Bryce Young had to play, and Bryce Young is playing right now for a dumpster fire of an organization, a variety of problems with that organization. They have ripped up and paved back over their entire functioning structure 3 or 4 times in the last 3 years.
Right.
Young has been a part of 2 of these now, and he looks completely lost. Nobody that knows anything about the position thinks that Bryce Young is as poor as he is playing right now.
That's right.
He has no confidence in himself. The offense that they're putting out for him is completely different than it was before, and all these things were patched together on the fly. Yep. You can't build a team like that. So Young obviously is the one that's going to suffer, but at the same time, I would argue because of the scrutiny that their owner has brought upon himself and upon the team, because of the front office moves that they've made that largely haven't worked out, I think you have to sit Bryce Young because the veteran, Andy Dalton, who this might be the last stretch of games he has in the NFL, he should be the one to handle all of that on the field, lead the team in a calm, composed manner, and probably lose every start that he makes because the team just isn't very good. He should be taking the bullets right now for Bryce Young, while Young, they can sit and work with Young to figure everything out. In other words, he might not be playing, but Young's the starter. You know that. It's okay to admit it, in my opinion. I think Dave Canellis, who also might not survive another season as a head coach, I think he's absolutely making the right move in this case. And it's because they didn't sit him when they had a functional disaster all around them. You can't throw a 22-year-old quarterback in the first overall pick and expect him to fix everything because you aren't able to handle any other component of your franchise. And that's the problem. But there are plenty of examples of a quarterback that can come in and shoulder that load. I don't think necessarily Bryce Young was that guy, but you're talking about an exceptional level quarterback. Even to the point, I might argue, Trevor Lawrence wasn't put in a much better position than Young was.
I agree.
As weird as this sounds, though, I think Joe Burrow might have been. I think Joe Burrow is also exceptional in a lot of ways, and they did have the right structure around him. I didn't think that they did, but they proved that they could put it together, and they're reaping the benefits of him playing right away, though he did get hurt and didn't play the entire season. Right. So there's something to be said about the younger player being shielded from the issues that caused them to be selecting first overall in the first place. And Carolina has paid multiple times now, and Bryce Young is having to carry that burden for them, and it's too big. I'd argue it's too big for any quarterback. I don't know what quarterback is going to make that team successful right now.
Right, because after Joe Burrow was drafted, 1 year later they drafted with the 5th overall pick Jamar Chase. They could have had Penny Sewell, but they drafted Chase. 1 year after Bryce Young was drafted, oh, wait a minute, Chicago selected Caleb Williams with their pick. See, they didn't have a pick.
And they don't have a second-round pick next year either.
Right, exactly. I mean, they mortgaged so much to do this, they're not giving him a chance to get people around him. The Steeler defense, you cannot win these games unless you are minimizing what the other team can do. Thus, field goals do make a difference in winning the games. What are you seeing from the Steeler defense in 2 games against 2 mediocre offenses, albeit, but still, the Steeler defense has been the best unit on the field in both games. Why?
I would, first and foremost, only feel right to point out that you're looking at Denver was horrible offensively in that game.
That's right.
A large part of that is a rookie quarterback who I don't know if he's big enough for the chair that he's in.
Can I tell you? Can I tell you a quick story? Yeah. I was around a group on Sunday, and when the Steelers scored to make it 7-0, I looked at the group and I said, "I'm not joking here. They now have enough points."
Yep. It was a question of how many field goals Denver was going to have to hit to win the game. Nick's, I mean, to be fair, is tight end, the guy that flat out couldn't catch the ball if you paid him to, like they were.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't helping anything, and that draws some attention away. But, oh, boy, he doesn't belong out there through 2 games. I mean, we talked about this, too. There was something about the way Sean Payton was really selling Bo Nix. I mean, coaches don't go out of their way to compliment a rookie quarterback that much. It was obvious to me that they were pumping him up. They needed to sell him to the fan base. He's lost. I mean, that's a problem. I don't know how much more he's going to be able to start. From a PR perspective, though, Payton might not be able to move off of him. But as far as Pittsburgh's defense went, I mean, from an individual assignment perspective, what I would say to do is look at Pittsburgh's defense operate and then look at their offense. I think most people would probably agree that Pittsburgh's defense is a little further along than the offense is, right? That's not a bold statement. Their defense is executing. They are operating with a sense of efficiency and a sense of brutality. They're beating their opponent. And they're doing it collectively because I felt, to Denver's credit, they did a great job isolating T.J. Watt. Watt was largely quiet in that game. We have not seen that much. I don't think they threw a whole lot of different things at Watt that they otherwise might not have. Conspiracy people might point out high altitude. He missed maybe a few more plays than he would in a game. But he was, I mean, he's a factor, obviously, but he didn't make the splash plays that you expect him to. We saw another pretty solid game from Deontay Jackson, which I don't think was expected. And I think Joey Porter Jr. also played a really good game. They're getting plays from their safeties, the ones not named Minka Fitzpatrick, which is different for Pittsburgh. We haven't seen that in a while. And I think they're getting outstanding play from their linebacking group. So they're operating like veterans. I think that unit, we will see very strong play consistently because it's not fluke efforts. That doesn't mean Justin Herbert doesn't change Denver's offense if he's in there. They've got Herbert at maybe a little less than 100% this week, but you're going to see a much better fundamental offensive team. That's going to be pure smash-mouth football. Can the Steelers hold up to that? That's the one issue with their defense that I might get into a little bit. Giving up some chunk plays on the ground. I think a team that's really going to want to isolate the run, focus on that primarily, and play a low-scoring game back at them the way the Steelers want to play it. I think basically the Chargers will give them a real good contest. And I think Justin Herbert, along with that, is vastly superior than the performances we saw from the last 2 quarterbacks. They can make a little bit more things happen. This is a much better opponent for them to play to find out how realistic they are defensively. 2 games against 2 probably inferior teams. We'll see, but I really like the direction it's going.
J.K. Dobbins is a terrific running back. He performs well in Harbaugh's system. Herbert's already got 3 touchdowns. And by the way, the 3 rookie starting quarterbacks in the first 2 weeks of the season have combined for exactly 0 touchdown passes. So far, so good. Offensively, here's the big question. Can they generate enough to win?
They have found 2 ways to do that. Asking them to do it a third time, in my mind, is pretty tough. Steelers used to be invincible in their home opener. They haven't been the last couple of years. I don't feel great about this for Pittsburgh's chances unless this is a week in which the coaching staff is relentless on them offensively as far as their discipline and as far as their operational execution goes. That was the primary concern. I noticed you didn't bring up Broderick Jones and whatever happened to him over that stretch of play.
I did.
I don't know, but wow, that was something. So you don't see that very much. In like a 5-play sequence, there was one. It wasn't procedure. You had 2 holding penalties and a false start. That's what it was. He had a solid rep, called for holding, beaten on a play, and called for a holding called for holding on maybe the best pass of Justin Fields' career.
Yeah.
That negated another 40-yard completion from this offense. They don't have many of these shots, and their own players are taking them away from them when they are executing them. I will say this, and I feel I owe this because I've been probably one of the more outspoken critics of George Pickens to this point. He looks fantastic.
Yeah,
he has done a great job preparing himself to be an all-level, all-route type of receiver. He's got an inside route now. He can run a slant. He can run a short post. He wasn't doing that particularly well before. They've got him doing it. They need to find ways, though, to get half of the defense off of him whenever he moves off the line, because that's what's happening. And they're not going to move until that happens because they're not running particularly well, which, you've got rotating right tackles, one of which appears to be playing against you in the time that he's in there, and the other one is making his first start along with the second starts of your left guard and your center. You've got some continuity problems on your offensive line quickly into the season. They've got to get right with that. They've got to be able to run the ball a bit and then start working in the play action and the rollout stuff that Fields can excel with. That's where the big plays are going to come from. But that's a long sequence problem. There are only so many practice sessions that they're going to get. They've got to fix all of that, though. But when they do, I think, you're going to look at, the potential of a few explosive plays in there. Maybe, this is crazy for the Steelers over the last 3 years, a game in which they score 2 touchdowns. They might be able to do a little something on offense. And this is going to be a really tough defense. I think they might give up yards against the Chargers. Like you said, Dobbins is playing real well, and Harbaugh is going to feed him until he, falls apart. And I don't mean that comedically because, his injury history and everything. But he's a great player. We've always known that he's a great player. It's going to be a tough test. Offensively, they've really got to get, to a point where they are functional operationally. Cut the penalties out. Be where you're supposed to be, make your blocks, and get up the field. And I know that sounds simple. It's a Pop Warner strategy, but Arthur Smith's offense is there. You can see it. They're doing things that will work. But from an execution standpoint, that has not gone well for them through 2 games.
Okay, I know we're running out of time, but I do have to ask this. I'm watching the Texans-Bears game the other night. There's an interception down the sideline. They called a pass interference in the center of the field about 30 yards away from where the pass was thrown, and you could see the entire time the pass was going to be thrown there. My biggest issue with officials on the field is that if only call stuff that affects the outcome of the play. In other words, there's a holding penalty, it gives the quarterback time, it affects the outcome of the play, right? If you spin a guy around the middle when they're not even looking there and you throw it over here, hold the flag unless they throw in that direction. There are too many penalties being called right now, in my opinion. Neal, your thoughts?
Which I think that's an excellent question. I've said this through 2 games. There are way more penalties, it seems, going against offense than there has been in the past.
Yes.
Steelers fans are quick to point to the offensive pass interference against George Pickens. That was a horrendous call at the NFL level. They don't make that call. I remember what you're talking about as far as the Bears and Texans game goes. You're right. If you look at the rule, look at how they define holding. The play needs to be there for it to be called. If it's away from the ball, they're not calling you for holding. And there's just much more of that than there needs to be, I think, and maybe that's contributing to the lower scoring. I'm not sure.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Can't wait to talk next week.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Neal Coolong on the show today, brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Sunbury Motors Ford in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza is having their fall kickoff blitz. Savings of up to $12,416 and financing as low as 0%. Score a great deal on the award-winning 2024 Ford Bronco Sport, and SMC has 18 in stock, priced from as low as $29,965. Sunbury Motors is going to give you a Hail Mary of a deal on over 50 2024 Ford Escapes, priced as low as $27,915. Plus, get 1.9% financing for 60 months. SMC is the Hall of Fame of Ford F-150s, with 35 available, with discounts of over $12,000, and they are slashed to the lowest price of the season, starting at only $48,859. Don't let the play clock run out on these awesome deals, as the final drive of savings ends Monday, September 30th. Sunbury Motors is a 5th-generation Ford dealer, proudly owned by the Mertz family for over a century.